Hello, it's me. I want to show you what I'm doing today. I'm making some all-purpose yeast dough. And the reason I call it all-purpose is because you can use it for a lot of different things. You can use it for pizza crust. That's what I'm going to use it for. Excuse me. And you can use it for breadsticks. You can use it to make rolls. You can make a loaf of bread out of it. All kinds of things. It's very simple ingredients, and I'll show you what I have. I have some yeast, and this is simply from Aldi. It's their store brand, Baker's Corner. I have some flour, also from Aldi. Got my little measuring cup here. And what I have here is a kettle, and I know that seems like a weird thing to make bread in, but this kettle is just, I'm not cooking it, it's just simply for the purpose of mixing it and raising the dough. And I like it because it's got handles on it, okay? And also it makes cleanup kind of easy too. So this is what I've done so far. I have put 2 cups of warm water in my kettle, and I've got, and you can use a bowl, you don't have to use a kettle. And I've got 1 tablespoon of sugar, and I put in a cup of flour, and I just mixed it up a little bit, and you don't have to beat it too much. So what it's going to do, see the bubbles forming there? The flour, I'm making, oh, I guess you could say it's a sponge. And so I'm just going to leave the lid on. I'm going to let that proof, which that's how you know that your yeast is good, because it can proof and it gives you that nice little bubbled up sponge. And then when that's ready, I'm going to add some more flour. Now this is probably going to take, I would say, 4 to 6 cups of flour. It just depends. And we will go from there. I will add a little salt to this before I add more flour in it. I don't like to add the salt right away. Truthfully, I don't know why I don't like to add the salt when the yeast is proofing. I'm sure there's a reason for it. It just does not feel right. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe somewhere along the way I heard don't put it in. But I do add a little sugar because that gives the yeast something to feed on, as well as the flour that's in there. So I don't add the salt, but I will add the salt after it proofs, and I'll just add the salt to my flour mixture rather than just pour it in there. It's not that much salt, just a little bit. Okay, all right. Once this proofs, we'll be back, and I will show you where we are going from there. Okay. All right. It's been about 10 minutes, I think. And as you can see, my yeast has proofed. You can see that it's all bubbly. And let me show you here. Grab my wooden spoon. See there? It's nice and bubbly. It smells yeasty and good. So I'm going to add a cup of flour, and I'm just going to add the flour 1 cup at a time. I've added a half a teaspoon of salt to this flour, and I'm going to just add my flour in there, stir it up. So what's in here so far is 2 packages of all-purpose, it's just all-purpose yeast, a cup of all-purpose flour, and 2 cups of water. That was my initial sponge. And then this is, I've added 1 cup of flour with a half a teaspoon of salt. And see, it's not really a recipe, but I'm just trying to give you an idea here of how things can work for you and how simple it is to do this. Very simple. Now, there's no oil in this. It's only got the 1 tablespoon of sugar, and that was for the yeast to feed off of, so this dough isn't going to taste like a sweet dough. And now I will, see, that's mixed in pretty good. Doesn't take long. And now I'm going to take another cup of flour. So what does that make so far? with the initial cup, and in this cup, that's 2 cups of flour. All right, I'm going to put another cup in there. I've added the other cup, and I'm mixing that in, and you can see it's getting thicker. That's what we want. And pretty soon, it will get thick enough that you're not going to be able to use your spoon. Okay, you may have to get in there with the tools God gave you and use your hands. I've always liked working with dough. I like to make pies, pie crust. I like to make bread and dough. I've never really enjoyed making cookies. I make them and they're good, but this is something that I really, really enjoy. I guess it just is very satisfying to me. And there's something about filling your home up with that wonderful smell of fresh baked bread or rolls. It's just the best. All right, now I'm going to use both my hands. I got to hang on to my container here, and I'm going to get this mixed up, and then we'll add another cup. So that's how many? That's 1, 2, this is the 3rd cup. Yep, that's the 3rd cup. I had to think for a second. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, you can see I've done all the mixing that I can do with my wooden spoon. That dough is coming together. So I'm going to add a little more flour, probably a half a cup more at a time, not a full cup, but a half a cup, until I get the dough to where I want it to be, and that is fairly elastic. It's pretty elastic right now, but it's pretty sticky, and I don't want it to be quite so sticky. So I will add more flour to it, but just a little bit at a time. And then I'll incorporate it with my hands until I get it where I want it to be. Now, something I wanted to point out to you. This is what I keep my flour in. I've kept my this container, I've had it for years. I suppose since the early 90s, and I don't know, I got it at Dollar General or something many years ago, and it's not dishwasher safe, but that's fine. I keep my flour, sugar, etc. in these kinds of containers. They were really inexpensive, a couple bucks. But this is what I did. I had some flour left in the bag. I poured the bag in here. This was a while back, and there was too much in the bag for this, so I stored the rest of the flour that was in the bag in my freezer. Generally, what I do is I will take that excess flour that's in the bag, and I put the bag in a freezer Ziploc bag. And I guess that day I was out of them, and I didn't do it, and so I just rolled up the bag and with the excess flour in it, and I just stuck it in the freezer. Actually, I put it in the door of the freezer. Well, last week I took it out and I used it. It was fine, but there was some left, and I put it in my canister. And last night I was preparing some snickerdoodle cookie dough for the freezer because I'm making some cookie doughs ahead of time. And I measured out the flour. There was a tiny bit left in here. I knew there wouldn't be enough for the batch of cookies, but there was a tiny bit left in here. And I measured out the flour, and I noticed it had an odor. Now, your flour should never have an odor, right? It should not really smell like anything. And this had a strange odor. And I had never ever noticed anything like that before with flour, and I thought, well, that doesn't seem right. So it occurred to me that probably what had happened when I froze that little bit of flour without the benefit of a freezer bag, that I think that moisture accumulated in there, and then when I stored it in the canister, Probably some moisture and heat accumulated, and it caused that sort of a moldy smell. It was off-putting. So I threw that out. There was a little less than 2 cups. I threw it out and washed my container very, very thoroughly, dried it, and then I let this set out with the lid off overnight before I added new flour in. So I just wanted to point that out to you, especially if you're going to freeze your flour. That's fine, but I would recommend putting it in a freezer bag and then freeze it that way. It keeps moisture out of it. It will make your flour last longer, but it will keep moisture out, and that's the most important thing. So fortunately, there wasn't too much that was wasted, but that was a lesson to me, and maybe that's something that will help you out in the future. I would never have used that flour, and you should not use flour if it has an odor, because there's something wrong. It started to spoil. It's got some sort of spores in it, mold spores or whatever. It looked normal, but it just had an off-putting smell. So I would definitely not use that. Okay, that's a lesson to me. Next time I do flour in the freezer, I will use my freezer storage bags. Very important. Okay, just that word to the wise there. All right, I'm going to add some more flour to this, get it to continue to mix, and we'll be back. But can't use my spoon. I'm going to have to use my hands. All right, be right back. Okay, here we go. I added another full cup of flour in here, and I just did it half a cup at a time because I didn't want to get too much. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the lid on this, since I'm doing it in my kettle, and I'm just going to set it aside and let it raise, and that's going to be the first rise. And since I'm using this for pizza dough, I'm not going to give it a second rise right away. I will divide it up and store it, because I'm going to make 2 pizzas out of this, 2 large ones. I'm going to divide it up, and then I'll just pop it in the refrigerator until it's time to use. Normally when I make pizza dough, I just make the dough, let it rise once, and then turn it into my pizza crust. And it works great that way. Now, if I were going to make bread out of this, or let's say if I'm going to make a loaf of bread, I would let it rise once, and then I would form it into whatever shape that I want, a loaf or rolls or whatever, and then I would let it rise again, of course, and probably brush the top with a little oil or whatever, and then let it rise and then bake it. But since I'm not doing that, I'm just making the pizza dough. This is what I'm doing with it. Now, you see, I'm still using the same kettle, the container. I didn't grease it or anything. I'm just leaving it like that. I'm not going to put any oil on this. I'm just leaving it that way. I'm going to put my lid on there, so that'll help keep the heat in. And I'm just going to push it to the back of the stove and just let it sit there until it doubles in size, at which point I'll punch it down and divide the dough in half, and then store it in a couple of different containers, and then just use it for my pizza. So after it does that rise, I will come back and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is just a simple way to do things. You can follow your own recipe, but I just want to show you it doesn't have to be a lot of work. It doesn't have to be a lot of trouble. I'm just doing this for pizza. You don't have to be a professional baker or an artisan baker, or you don't have to be any of those things. You can just make it yourself easily and simply. Okay? All right. When this is raised up, doubled in size, I will bring you back and show you what that looks like. All right. Hang in there. Okay. It's been about an hour, and I would say about an hour and a half. and I'm going to show you what the raised dough looks like. Now, it's doubled in size easily, and it smells good. I wish you could smell that nice yeasty bread smell that's coming out of it. And you can see that it's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to not punch it down, but I'm going to press it down. I'm going to get the air out of it. I'm going to knead it a little bit. I'm going to do that right here in the pan. If I need to add a little flour to it, I can if it's a little sticky. And then I'm going to divide it into 2 portions, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of oil on the outside. And the reason for that is because I'm going to put it in the plastic bags. I'm going to store it in 2 plastic bags in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use it for pizza dough for tonight's supper. I've got some family coming over, and I thought a couple of nice large homemade pizzas would taste really good along with a big salad. So, all right then, I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back. Oh, this dough is really nice. Now listen, just so you know what went in this, as a reminder, I started with 2 cups of water, 2 packages of active yeast, and 1 cup of flour and a tablespoon of sugar. I let that proof, remember, and then I added my flour 1 cup at a time until I had my dough mixed. And the flour came to 5 cups. Okay, yours may vary. This is what it came to. So I've got this nice. Look how nice this dough is. Oh gosh, it's great. It's a little bit sticky, but you know what? It's not bad. And I may just sprinkle a little bit of flour on it to keep it from sticking to my hands so much when I'm trying to get it into 2 nice balls and put it in my bags. Now, be aware when you put it in your bags in your refrigerator, it will raise up a little bit, but not bad, really. If it does, that really isn't a big deal. Just put the balls in there, zip your bag shut, and you'll be good to go until you're ready to use them for your supper. So you can make this ahead of time, and you can freeze this if you want to. If you want to make it ahead of time and freeze your individual portions, feel free. Okay, all right, I'll show you what that looks like when we get back. Okay, you can see that I punched it down, I've kneaded it, and I did it all in the pan. I just added a little bit of flour. I did it all in this pan. I have not dirtied my countertop with flour. I haven't done anything to the surface of my counter. See, it all still looks the same. I've kept my mess in the pan. So I took my handy dandy trusty knife here, and I just divided it down the center as evenly as I could. And I'm just going to take that. See how nice that dough is? Oh wow, I love it so much. I'm just going to take each one and I'm going to just put it in a little ball here, a little pod, and I'm going to put it in the plastic bag. But first, I'll just take a little bit of oil, and I'm going to just coat my hands and then coat each one. I'm not going to use too much because it isn't necessary. So hang on, and we'll be back, and I'll show you that. Okay, doesn't that look nice? I have 2 separate ones here. That's for 2 large pizzas. And so I'm going to put them in the bags, and when I do, because I'm going to use them the same day, I'm not going to date the bags or anything, but if I were going to pop these in the freezer, I would definitely put the contents and the date, okay? All right, I hope you'll give this a try. It's fun, it's easy, and chances are you probably already have the ingredients in your home. To stop and think a moment about how really inexpensive these 2 large pizza crusts are, and depending on your toppings, you can make 2 very nice pizzas very inexpensively. Or, you know what? I could take this right now and I could grease a loaf pan and shape these into a loaf and put them. I could have 2 beautiful loaves of bread if I wanted to. So, you know what? There's all kinds of things that you can do with this simple method of bread making or pizza dough making or breadsticks. It's your choice, okay? All right, I'm going to get these in the bags and get them in the refrigerator before they start raising up on me again. And you know what? I got faith in you. You can do this. If I can do it, seriously, you can do it too, okay? All right, I hope you give this a try. And you just remember that little is much when God is in it. Okay, I love ya. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you for watching Simple Food, Simple Life. Please like, subscribe, and share.